Oh, look at me in the morning.
That's right. Let's talk about Mike Patton this time around. You know, as a fan of metal music, I'm always trying to find the fastest band or the heaviest band or whatever. Uh, Trying to kind of get to know the extremes, so to say. Uh, One of these questions for a quite long while has been, what's the weirdest band out there? And as always, these questions are really subjective. It depends on what you think is weird and so on. But for me, the answer, and for many others, seems to be Mr. Bungle. This is their first album from 1991. It's kind of like this funk metal band that is also doing all these other weird shit, basically. Um, it's all over the place, really. Very, very strange music, very disturbing topics and titles. We're handling sexuality, we're handling stuff like suicide, and every weird out of there kind of thing. Basically, the different members of the band, Mike Patton, who is their main vocalist, and Trace Bruins, who is the guitar player and also plays a whole bunch of other instruments, and Trevor Dunn, the bass player, uh, have worked with these other musicians, and it's you've got pretty much every different kind of music that is known to man put together, more or less. Um, the first tracks that really got my attention on this one was Carousel and My Ass is on Fire. Also, Love is a Fist, that is kind of a heavy one. But with time and more listening, I really learned to enjoy pretty much the whole album, quote unquote, which used to be called John Travolta, but they couldn't actually release the song with that title because it would have possibly got them into some hot water. Slowly Growing Deaf, that's a really cool, kind of a mellow song with some really heavy parts. Squeeze Me Macaroni, that's a cool one. Very, it's very strange stuff. But even tracks like Egg and Stubba Dub, and yeah, it's all good pretty much. There are some things here, some stuff between the songs, kind of, which I don't know. Is it actually that relevant? I mean, there are sections here, like the closing section of My Ass is on Fire, where Mike Patton keeps saying, redundant, 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 which is kind of redundant, more or less. But, I like that one, that bit quite a lot. But there's some other stuff. I guess they were like hitchhiking on certain trains or something like that, and they kind of recorded the thing and put it here, and some of that stuff doesn't really open up that well to me personally. So while it is a really cool album and I like the weirdness of it, sometimes the weirdness kind of gets to this uninteresting point where it's, yeah, you can have 5 minutes of random discussions on some outro of the song, or whatever, but what's the point, really? I mean, sometimes you could maybe cut it down just a bit. Other than that, pretty much a perfect album. Really interesting first listen it's gonna make. If you want to check that one out, definitely recommend it. Their second album was released in 1995. It's called Disco Volante. And this is the weirdest of all of their albums. It's got everything. It's all over the place. Uh, so if you're looking for a very specific weird album, get this one. It has some really brilliant songs. It's got stuff like Chemical Marriage, Carry Stress in the Jaw, and there's a hidden track behind it, which is really cool too. Desert Search for Techno Allah, which is actually electronic music, but it's so, I usually I hate electronic music. I don't really care for that too much. But here it's blended so nicely in there, it works. Absolutely one of the highlights of this album. You can also hear this type of approach with Igor, the French band, who are doing this kind of electronic combined with metal combined with opera, singing every pretty much all the different styles of music you can expect. Also some French, what's that, accordion music and all that. Violenza Domestica is kind of cool. Mamishka Mausquaus is what a brilliant title for or a song. That might be one of the best here. Merry Go Bye Bye is really cool too. The closing section, Nothing, is horrible. It's just like these bits and pieces from the recording. It's nonsense really. But the actual song at the beginning of the track, I think, is really cool. Platypus, although it was already written around the time of the first Mr. Bungle album, I think is a real cool one. But then there are some really bad songs here. Like the opening track, Everyone I Went to High School With Is Dead. Yeah, that's a very haunting and interesting topic. And it's kind of a metal song, but it's a really bad metal song. It just sounds horrible. After School Special isn't anything special, unfortunately. Phlegmatics, I don't really care for. The Bends is basically like talking about this disease you get if you're diving and you get back to the surface too quickly. And it's just a bunch of random noise, really. So there's this stuff that, even though some sections on the Bends are pretty good, some are pretty horrible. So, and kind of like boring, Probably I'm just too dumb to get it, but I would say if you want to hear something really weird, this would be a perfect 10. As a listening experience, maybe an 8, 8.5. There's some unnecessary fluff there. If they would only cut it down a bit, it would be a much better album in my opinion. But there you have it. Here's the third album. It's from 1999 called California. This is their easy listening album. So while you do get all these different styles of music, it's done really beautifully. There's that warm California sound. At the time when I heard this, I was listening to Beach Boys, actually. Their album called Smile. And it's this kind of a weird, quirky pop album from the 60s. And this one has some of the same instruments and some of the same good vibrations, basically, that Beach Boys has. So this one is really fun to listen to. While the first two, you have to really kind of concentrate and try to focus, and they're not always so easy to get into. This one should be pretty easy if you're open-minded about music. Lots of haunting, interesting stuff. It's mostly I would say, very positive album, kind of a happy sounding album. There are some heavy and scary stuff here. There's some kind of, I don't know what you would call it, kind of like slightly sad and nostalgic feelings also. Great album. I think pretty much all the tracks stand on their own. Some of these tracks aren't maybe quite that good, but usually they're a bit shorter. Like Vanity Fair, for instance, isn't quite my favorite. So, but it's only 3 minutes, slightly less than 3 minutes, so that works. The closing track, Goodbye Sober Day, is brilliant. Sweet Charity is excellent. None of them knew they were robots. It's like this kind of fast rock and roll type of song. Retro Vertigo, It's really emotional. Air Conditioned Nightmare is really fun, really kind of fast-paced song. It's all good. You can listen to this from start to finish. So as far as the weirdness go, well, in Mr. Bungle scale, I would probably give this an 8.5 on the weirdness. But as far as enjoying the album and listening to it, this would be a perfect 10. It's a really, really good album, definitely. They also have a fourth album. So they started off kind of like funk metal with lots of weird shit thrown in there. Turned into a full-on avant-garde attack with this almost like very artsy approach, the music and sound and noise. And then they turned into this really kind of almost like a quirky rock band doing all these different genres of music. A bit like maybe 70s Queen would be in the late 90s, but just even more out there. So, what did they decide to do on their fourth album in 2020? Or is it 2019? It's 2020, I think, yeah. So what they did, they returned back to 1986 when they released their very first demo called The Raging Wrath of the Easter Bunny. And this album is called The Raging Wrath of the Easter Bunny Demo. But they actually recorded it with good studio technology, and it's really very, very faithful to that early demo. They started off like a thrash metal band or crossover band. This kind of like these hardcore, I guess mostly the singing does it, that it's kind of like a crossover thing. Also, it's kind of like almost like a joke band at some points. Well, they start singing La Cucaracha in the middle of their song or something like that. But then it's also like the musicianship is really, really cool on this one. They have Scott Ian from Anthrax, and they have Dave Lombardo from Slayer playing here. So it's really tight, and it's really like actual metal. So if you're a huge metal fan, this one would probably be the easiest to get into. It's got, absolutely brilliant song titles. You have to remember these guys were like something like 16 or 17 around the time when they were recording this. So there are some really great titles here. I think my favorite songs would be Raping Your Mind. That's a really cool one. And Spreading the Thighs of Death. That's a pretty excellent one as well. Those would be like the really high points keeping this thing together. Around 6 minutes each, and they're like a complete thrash fest where it's really fast riffing, and there's some interesting scales they are playing, and some short solo pieces and stuff like that. Bungle Grind, I think that's an excellent song as well. Anarchy Up Your Anus, and so on. Sudden Death. It's a really solid one. I think the only problem with this one is it's a bit too long for my taste. It kind of, because it's not that weird. It's a highly listenable album. I would probably give it like an 8.5 or maybe a 9. But it's kind of one-dimensional compared to the old Bungle stuff from the 90s. So while I do enjoy it, it's way closer to any thrash metal band than what they used to do. They were really unique. With this one, they're not quite that unique. It was a big surprise when they released this, but it's still kind of, I don't know. I wouldn't call it their best. I wouldn't say that this is indicative of what Mr. Bungle is all about. I think California would even be a much better signpost at what Mr. Bungle is all about. But if you're into metal, this should be a fun listening. The biggest problem I have with this one is probably the middle section. Bungle Grind, which is also an excellent track. After that, they put these new tracks here, like Mathematics and Erasist, which weren't here before. Mathematics is really long. I think it's around 9 minutes, and it has the same thrash style that this one has. The other tracks have here, but it seems a bit more constrained somehow. It's not quite happening as much, and it's a really long song, so it kind of kills the middle section of this album for me personally. And then Erasist, while the topic that they're handling is really important and it's really well done, it kind of feels like this is the wrong album to put this song here. It just kind of slows down the midsection even more, even though it's, I guess, around 4 minutes. Uh, I think Loss for Words and Glutton for Punishment, though, I think those work rather nice. So if I would do anything differently, I would put Mathematics and Erasist at the end of the album as bonus tracks. Grizzly Adams is kind of long too for an intro, but it's kind of weird sounding, and it kind of creates the tension for the album, so I guess that's fine. Hypocrites, it's okay. I think the cucaracha part is is great also, and it's one of those few places on this one where the weirdness really hits you, and you kind of feel that Mr. Bungle influence there. So I was talking about John Zorn before, the guy who helped to produce and record the first Mr. Bungle album. So he had his project where he was combining basically grindcore with jazz fusion, and this is their album called Naked City. And you got all kinds of songs here. There are so many. What are there? 26 tracks. Some of them are extremely short, like these few seconds, really sudden bursts of shouting and noise and all that kind of thing. And some of these are pretty long, and they do some like movie soundtrack covers and stuff like that. So there are all sorts of things here. I also have this collection, but it has a cover artwork that people are gonna probably get pissed off about. So I'm not gonna show that one. It's called Torture Garden, if you want to check it out. There's some nudity involved there, so, I don't know what the guidelines on YouTube are with those things. Then Mike Patton, of course, is best known probably still to this day with his singing in Faith No More. I only have one album from Faith No More. It's their heaviest, and it's the one people usually say is the worst Faith No More album. I don't know why, I absolutely love it. It's like every other track here is really heavy, like "Don't look at me like in the morning," and then the every second track here is funk or jazz, or I don't know what kind of music, but kind of this more mellow music. I think there's almost like a tango thing happening there. Carajo voador kind of thing. And there's some country music and all these different genres. My favorite tracks, I guess, would be the heavy ones, to be honest. Get Out is a solid opening track. The Gentle Art of Making Enemies is such a brilliant one. You can really hear Mike Patton putting his soul into these lines, like "Happy Birthday," and then saying something else that I probably shouldn't say out loud. But you can hear it for yourself if you listen to "King for a Day, Fool for a Lifetime." "Ugly in the Morning." "Dig in the Grave" is more melodic, but I think it's a cool song. Also, these more mellow songs like "Star AD," I think that's a pretty cool one. It's kind of a long album though, so maybe I would have finished it around track number 10 after Take This Bottle. I think that would be a suitable closing track for the album. It's not that the 4 final tracks are horrible or anything, but it would just make it that much better. better for my ability to concentrate on the music. And here is Fantomas. This is absolutely bonkers as well. It's basically just random noise, which is combined with metal music, this kind of aggressive, thrashy metal. And I believe Dave Lombardo was playing the drums here as well. So that gives some indication on what we're talking about. And then there's some sound effects from cartoons, and it's really bonkers. So this might be one of the weirdest albums as well. Okay, so that's 20 minutes about that. Mr. Bungle has released a live concert where they play pretty much all the songs from this one, and I've seen it once. I think they were playing in this like a library setting, and there isn't actually a live audience involved, so it's like a studio live kind of thing. There are some of their shows are floating around the internet. There's a really cool one from 1991, from around the time of their first album, called, I think, Lingerie or whatever it's called. Mr. Bungle Lingerie 1991. You should find that one. There are some shows from 1995. I haven't spotted anything which would be pro shot from this era, but there might be some. And then I think around 99 or 2000, around their third album, California, they were playing at this festival called Bizarre Festival. So that would be from 2000, I think. And I think that's a really great show as well. So if you want to check into that stuff, there are some live material floating around. I just recently actually found out about some of these shows. So that's about that. Okay, so see you on the next one.